this photo here, the two things to take away from my talk today on our Alice River Gold project is scale and grade. We're 2 years into the project now. We listed in the middle of 2021, and so we're in our third field season in North Queensland. Everything we've done to date has added value to the project, as you'll see, but we do still believe we're at the tip of the iceberg. So the things to take away are scale and grade, and that's what the project has. This geologist here is actually counting gold grains in drill core. Doesn't happen very often, but this, one of our favourite holes, 61, had a couple of hundred grains in an intersection. And luckily for us, that's the style of gold deposit that we're actually chasing. The usual disclaimer. All the information in this presentation is on our website and obviously on the ASX website, so feel free to dig into the background there and come and see Tony, our MD, and I at the booth. Alice River is actually an old gold field discovered in the early 1900s. We're up on Cape York in North Queensland. We're at the northern end of basically the North Queensland Gold Province, which has produced about 40 million ounces plus over its history. Still a couple of operating mines there in Ravenswood and Pagingo. We're located about 6 hours drive north of Cairns, so quite flat, inhospitable terrain, but great place to find gold deposits. We have about 400 square k's of tenement granted and another 600 odd square k's under application. Our main focus is this Alice River fault zone through here, which we've got about 50 k's under tenure here and probably another 20 or so to the south. The project was dormant from the early 2000s up until we got it in 2020, and by dormant I mean it was owned by a private prospector. There was no public company or even private company exploration done in those 20 years. It was mined in the mid-90s before that with a small open pit, and it was explored extensively through the 80s. But in essence, we're the first mover to actually apply modern exploration to the project. What I'll give you today is just a snapshot of what we've done in the past field season on three main target areas. The central target here, which was our focus right from the start, underneath the historic pit. Some fantastic high-grade results there, and as you'll see as I go through, we've taken mineralisation that basically bottomed out 20 or 30 metres below a 50-metre pit, and we've extended it down to 500 metres depth, and it's still wide open. We'll also talk about our southern target. So the central target sits up here, the southern target's about 3 kilometres to the south. We started work on this target this year. The southern target hosts exposed quartz lodes that were mined by the old timers in the 1900s. A little bit of drilling in the 1980s, and we're now stepping down below that. Our first program earlier this year came up with some fantastic results. The other thing I'll show you is that we're also identifying a lot of new targets based on IP geophysics, and that's been the game changer for us, as I'll go through in a minute. We're now drilling geophysics targets, specific geophysics targets undercover, and returning some encouraging results in actual, first pass holes on some very wide sheeted quartz vein systems that are actually concealed. They're not outcropping. The old timers didn't see them, so really exciting. Thirdly, we've got a big tenement package. As I said, we've got about 50 kilometres of this Alice River fault zone under tenure. We know that 30 kilometres of it is actually mineralised, and I'll talk today about our Posey prospect, which is one of the first ones we've tested along strike from the southern and central targets, and we released some results only this week on some rock chip sampling we've done there. Corporately, as I said, we listed 2 years ago. We have quite a tight register, a small capital structure. We've got only 67 million shares on issue. Importantly, we've got some really nice major institutional support, and these guys have all been there from the start. RCF, Acorn actually came in at our first raising. RCF was there from the float, Lowe funds and Altor, and they're quite supportive of us, and hopefully you'll see why. Our board is basically a mix of finance, exploration, geology, mine development, and most importantly, stakeholder relations. So we've got all of that spectrum covered with the board members. Zooming in here now on the Alice River Fault Zone, on the image here to the right. What you can see here is an outline of the structural zone through here. Now the Alice River Fault Zone is not just one fault, it's a number of faults and a number of fault slices. Importantly, more than one fault slice is mineralised, so while we've got 30 k's of strike, it's actually more than that because we've got parallel zones that are actually mineralised as well. This is the IP geophysics we've undertaken to date, and this is actually a survey which we finished about a month ago, which is still being processed. The photo here on the left is basically the old open pit, which was mined in the 1990s, produced about 30,000 ounces, down to about 50 metres. Sits in here on granted mining leases. We've got granted mining leases on the central leases and the southern leases. Very limited exploration since the mine closure, as I mentioned. And really 95% of this structure is under sand cover, so the exposure is really limited. As I mentioned, the IP has been a real game changer for us, and when we first got into the project, we understood that we were dealing with a concealed system, and the best way to explore that, we felt, was geophysics. Now, a lot of gold explorers in the right terrain look at IP geophysics and test chargeability highs, which is an indication of sulphide mineralisation, and gold associated with that. We've gone the other way and tested resistivity lows, which is an indication of alteration and structure. And what you see here, if you look at focus on this blue-purple linear zone here, this is the Alice River Fault Zone. These are oblique slices of resistivity that we've captured across the zone. This is where the old open pit is here. Continues up to the north with multiple zones, the Posey structure here, and then the southern targets here. This is still open to the north and the south. We've now completed about 16 kilometres of IP and tracked that fault zone and parallel fault zones right through. If you look at this cross section here, this is a section just to the south of the open pit. As you can see, as we get deeper and deeper, drilling down this resistivity low, the mineralisation is getting broader and better grade. So the open pit basically was at this depth. We've continued to drill down and hitting some fantastic intersections as we keep going. I'll zoom in now to the central target, which is based around the open pit, sitting in here. This is where the bulk of our exploration was done in 2021 and 2022. We've outlined a very large open gold system here. Done a lot of diamond drilling, and it was really important in earlier days to have some diamond drilling because there was no historical data, no core. We had a database, but no core to back it up. It's a structurally hosted deposit. There's an array of cross-cutting quartz veins that are controlled by larger through-going structures that are also mineralised. I'll show you a long section through here in a minute. The takeaway here is that the mineralisation still sits in this resistivity corridor, but it sits on both margins. And we see here, early this year, we announced a metre at 41 grams in a hole on the F12 zone. We've got a metre at 60 up here on the F1A, away from where we've done the main drilling. 2 at 10 on the F1B zone here. So these structures are wide open along strike and also at depth. And you can see that here, remarkably consistent. And while it looks like we've just drawn one vein here, you can see the widths here, 43 metres, 25 metres, 16 metres. It's actually a stockwork zone with controlling structures on it. This is a long section through the central target. The takeaways here are the size of the pit when we first started, and this is the limit of the historical drilling that the owners did back then. This was done in the mid-90s, and at that time the gold price was probably south of $400 US and heading even further south down to 200. So I think the mine closed prematurely simply because they stopped drilling. We've now extended that mineralisation to 500 metres depth. We're open to the south, we're open to the north, in basically all directions. So there's a lot more drilling left to do here to move this up to a resource category. The southern target, as I said, this is a lode system that the old timers mined. It was drilled with some shallow holes in the 1980s. We completed our first program this year through the mining leases here and stepping down basically underneath the old drilling and came up with some really nice high-grade lode intersections, visible gold. Quite encouraging for us, given we consider this to be the same as the central target, but we're still 300 metres higher in our drilling base than what we are at the central target. So a lot of room to move, open along strike to the north and the south. The other big takeaway here is this resistivity low corridor hosts a number of resistivity highs. You can see these outlines in red here, which are little subtle resistivity highs. We believe these are actually concealed quartz vein systems themselves that weren't touched by the old timers. We confirmed that this year with the very first, what I'd call a wildcat hole, drilled into this one here, intersected nearly 27 metres at 0.6, but importantly intersected a really broad zone of about 40 metres downhole of sheeted quartz veining, probably one of the widest zones I've seen in all the drilling we've done so far. So that gives us real confidence to be then exploring these ones along strike and open to the south. If you look at the two systems together, which we consider really as one system, it's massive. We've got probably 4 kilometres of strike from the northern end of the central to the southern end of the south. It's open in both directions. Our wildcat hole sits in here. These are some of the shallow exposed veins that were drilled traditionally, or drilled in the 1980s with our drilling underneath. There's plenty of room to move here in between these, and we're quite confident. We know the structure's there. We know the alterations there in that structure, so we'll be drilling that later this year. Lastly, just want to talk to you about a new prospect which we announced this week called Posey. Posey sits up to the north of the central target. It's about 5 kilometres to the north. It's on a structure that's parallel and to the west of the main Ellis River fault zone. As I said, that's a real bonus for us because we know that there's multiple mineralised structures, not just the one. Posey's got an interesting history. In the 1990s, the explorers there did some trenching and found some colluvial gold in a shallow surface layer about 2 metres thick. And they trenched it, got some great numbers. They stripped it off in 5 small areas here, over about 1.5 kilometre of strike. Trucked it down to the mill, put it through. They got about 3,000 ounces of gold out of it. They did a few limited drill holes into the colluvium, and these ones here actually went into the basement, and these are actually basement vein intersections. They didn't do any further work. And as I said, I think it was a reflection of the end of mine life and the gold price at the time. What they did when they strip mined was they exposed basement quartz veining at the surface, but no one up until us this year had ever sampled it before. So we did a big program in June, July this year and came back with basically 65 samples averaging 4 grams gold over about 1.5 kilometres of strike. A peak of about 46 grams. The resistivity image here under the base shows a structural zone very similar to what we see on the main Ellis River fault. What we believe though is that this sheeted vein system, what we see that's exposed is probably not all that there is. We think it's actually much wider because there's a lot of shallow sand cover both to the west and to the north and the south of this system. Really exciting project. This is, everything we do, as I said, is added value, and we've really just focused on this central 5 kilometres, and we've got another 25 kilometres of mineralised prospectivity along strike. So just to close, we're a single project company, but we believe that this is the best project that we've seen. Tony and I have sort of worked together on and off for 30 years, and this is one of the best projects we've actually worked on. We've got a real first mover advantage here in applying modern exploration to an unloved project. We're planning a drilling program for the coming quarter, focused on testing the southern target IP anomalies on the cover, and the extensions to the drilling that we've just completed. We're also planning to drill on Posey itself, and follow up some of the central high-grade intersections on the F12 and the F1B structures that haven't seen a lot of drilling. So quite a lot of news flow to come over the next few months. Stay tuned and come and have a chat to us at the booth if you'd like some more information. Thank you.